Uh, Good morning, and by way of introduction, my name is Ron, and I live in Southern California. I've lived in Southern California my whole life, except for the 11 years that I spent in the United States Air Force. In the Air Force, I first went to San Antonio, Texas for basic training. Then I went to Biloxi, Mississippi for technical school. And then I came back to California, but it was up on more on the Central Coast. It was Vandenberg Air Force Base for 2 years, and then went to what was then West Germany for 3 years at a base called Hahn Air Base in what was then West Germany. And then in 1989, September of 1989, I came back to the United States and spent the remaining term or remaining part of my career, the next 5 years, at Kelly Air Force Base in Texas. And I came back 2 months in 1989 before the Berlin Wall went down. So that's a little bit about who I am and what I'm about. I have been registered as a Republican in 1980 because the politician that at that time that had the most influence on me was Ronald Reagan. And I was a registered Republican. Then I ended up being a libertarian, registering libertarian for a while. And right now I am a registered independent. So, there you go.
And get this, after Brian Peck, who was one of the lead creeps at Nickelodeon, served 16 months in prison for the he did there, Disney hired him, naturally, to work on a children's series. Oh, for in Hollywood, it's a small world after all. And not just Hollywood. There are Instagram moms these days who are practically only their itty-bitty beauty queen daughters by having them wear skimpy bikinis and eat bananas to build social media stardom. They're called charenters, a hybrid of sharing and parent. I call them pimps, a hybrid of pimp and people who believe in social justice have agreed this is wrong and this is bad, and exposing kids to an adult world of costumes and makeup borders on a now. Hurry up and get in the car. We're late for Drag Queen Story Hour.
Good morning. It's Friday, Policecraft Friday, May the 24th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, the 33 strategies of war, and policecraft. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now, Stuart Varney with the headline.
Well, and good morning, everyone. Oh, what a night it was. Trump rallies in the South Bronx and the crowd goes wild. No Republican presidential candidate has appeared in the Bronx since Ronald Reagan 4 decades ago. It's alien territory to the GOP. But last night, Trump delivered an upbeat and positive message. It was a diverse audience, and they liked what they heard. More on that in a moment. Here's what's happening on the markets this morning after Thursday's heavy selling. The Dow lost 600 points Thursday, a very modest bounce back in the early going today. Dow's up 50, Nasdaq up about 60. There was one huge winner Thursday, been a winner for some time now, and that's Nvidia. No serious pullback this morning. In fact, it's up again, another $9 higher. That's 0.92%, $1,047 per Nvidia share. Interest rates, not that much change. The yield on the 10-year just below 4.5%. The yield on the 2-year Treasury, that's coming in just below 5%, 4.96. Bitcoin, we have that placed at, let's see now, 67.4 right now. And gold, 23.35 at last count. No, 23.63 we have it now. Oil, $76 a barrel. Regular gas averages $3.60 a gallon. That's down 1 cent. Diesel, $3.89, down 1 cent. Politics. Confusion at the president's press conference. He wasn't sure what question he'd been asked. He took only 2 prearranged questions. A well-known pollster, Nate Silver, says Biden, quote, needs to consider stepping aside if he's still struggling in August. There is a growing chorus of Democrats who want a different candidate. On the show today, we'll show you how the far left takes taxpayer money to push their causes. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars going to fund division and hate. And it's your money. And we'll draw the parallel between Ronald Reagan's visit to the Bronx in 1980 and Donald Trump's rally there last night. In the 1980 election, Reagan won New York State. Does the parallel hold for Donald Trump in 2024? We'll see. It's Friday, May 23rd, 2024. Varney and Company is about to begin.
And so a quick note here is that when he's saying, he misspoke when he says that the far left is using taxpayer money to push their own agenda. Well, of course they are. So do Republicans. The real issue is, are they effective? That's the question. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little Mafia action.
Someone puts a contract on your life, and does that contract ever get removed, or is it an open?
Well, I think in my case it was removed. Number one, the boss is dead, and the people that are there in that life now, they're not worried about me. But don't get me wrong. I don't thumb my nose in their face. I can't go back to Brooklyn and say, hey, guys, I'm moving back into the neighborhood. I watch where I go and who I associate with.
And do you ever get any trouble?
No. I haven't had any issues in the 25 years since I've gone away. I mean, I've heard things, social media, people make threats on your life, but that's nonsense. But no, I've never had anything seriously that I had to be concerned about. I was 20 years old. I was out in Suffolk County, Long Island. I had a little place out there called Sonny's Pizza. I was in the pizza business way back then. I named it after my dad. I love my dad, right? And I'm sitting in a bar next door to the pizza place, and I'm sitting with a couple of guys, and we're just talking back and forth. And all of a sudden, the guy starts talking, and he tells me, yeah, you got to see this girlfriend I got, man. She's a tough woman, and starts talking like that. And I said, well, what do you mean, tough? And he said, well, she was involved with gangsters. And I said, really? Yeah. And he didn't know who I was, by the way. I said, what kind of gangsters? He said, well, there was this big bank robbery case, and some mob guy got convicted of it, and, her husband was one of the witnesses against the mob guy. This is sounding very familiar. My father was convicted of masterminding a nationwide string of bank robberies. Pulls out his gun right in the middle of the restaurant. I'll never forget, my father looks at him and says, go ahead, I'll drop you before you get off your first shot. Just like that. And I actually grew up hating the police, hated law enforcement, hated the government, because I loved my dad. He was my idol. And I always saw them as the enemy, trying to harass my dad, harass my family. So I grew up with that kind of, thinking. Some of the law enforcement people harassed us. You know, I remember one time we went into a restaurant. I was one of 7 kids. We go into a restaurant, sit down, have a bite to eat. There's like 7 of them because they had different agencies following you. They'd come in, sit at the table behind us, watch us eat. So one night, this guy was a Nassau County detective. He passes by my table and makes a really nasty remark for my dad, loud enough for everybody to hear. My dad didn't like that. You know, you don't disrespect his family.
Yeah.
He jumped up right after the agent. The agent got scared. My dad was a tough guy. He pulls out his gun right in the middle of the restaurant. There was a Jewish guy, actually, but very close to my dad, very close to me, right? And when my father went away, he was kind of like a second father to me. He made a mistake. I don't want to get into all the details. And this was the first eye-opening experience I had. And he got beat up, really bad, devastated. I mean, they just mutilated his body. So I went to the funeral, and his sister came up to me and she said, Michael, look what these animals, and it happened within the life, look what these animals did to my brother. It was a closed coffin. She opens the coffin, and I'll be honest with you, Bobby, I almost got sick. He was unrecognizable. That's when I got a bird's eye view of what the life was really all about. And then I'm at a rally, and Joe Colombo, who was my boss, who I loved, gets shot. I'm 12 steps away from him. He died eventually from the wounds. When you had to sit down, it was like a meeting, but you had to resolve a dispute. You had to resolve something that was going on in a family. And, you'd have either the boss or the underboss or a captain sitting down, and whoever it was that had the problem, you start to air out your difference. But there's rules in a sit down. They were very effective. Let me explain something to you. You're a made guy, make believe, hopefully one day. You could be sitting there lying through your teeth, and if I call you a liar, I lose the argument. Oh, wow. Because I can't be disrespectful to you. I can't raise my voice to you. Made guys cannot be disrespectful to one another.
I wasn't there the night this melee started. They said, well, who was in the car waiting for him in front of the bar? There was a heavy guy driving a Cadillac. That's Chicky. We got word through a son of one of the organized crime guys. You're going to get it. We jump in my Cadillac. We drive to Fort Lauderdale. We're there about a month. We call home, and they got us. They go, hey, it's over. Come back. We go to the meeting. And I said, this don't look good. And he says, come on in. They're just going to talk. Don't worry about it. So all of a sudden, we hear the garage door in the back go up. What a crew. These guys are legitimate animals. The guy starts talking. He says, you guys think you're gangsters, huh? I'm going to show you how gangsters act. He starts giving his kid punches. Any one of these punches would have knocked anybody out. Nose splits open. And then he goes after this other kid. When he goes to throw the punch, he went like this. Did he just put your hands up to you? They really gave it to him. Now it's my turn. I'm bracing. He stood up and he goes, and you want to be a tough guy too? And he goes to throw a punch, and his nephew stops him. Goes, Uncle Tony, don't hit this kid. This kid's a good kid. He's just a jerk. He drives them around when they do all their craziness. And then this guy takes out a knot like this wide of money, and he says, hey, go get us coffees.
To show you how fortunate I am, the 5 guys that I took the oath with, they were all murdered later on, every one of them. None of them survived. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and my dad, John Francis, they called him Sonny. That was kind of his nickname during my younger age. At times getting flack in school from kids because my dad was, all over the newspaper. Your dad's a Mafia dad, so I'd fight in the schoolyard, stuff like that. But, inside the house, my dad tried to keep us as a family as best he possibly could, but that's how it was.
That you were making how much?
We were bringing in $8 to $10 million a week at the height of the operation, selling 500 million gallons of gas a month, taking down 30 to 40 cents a gallon, depending upon what deal we made. It's a lot of money.
How are you laundering all that money?
Wasn't easy. We had a lot of cash in the beginning, and then when we switched over and we were collecting money through wires and everything, I had money in foreign accounts. We were moving it right out of the country.
I want you to sanction the hit on Ralph Zifferetto.
What? Are you kidding me?
Violated my wife's honor.
Ralph slept with Jenny?
He insulted her. He made a very insensitive joke about her body to some friends of ours.
What did he say?
Have to repeat it? The word's not good enough?
Not if you want him clipped over it.
He said she was having a 90-pound mole removed from her ass. The implication was that her ass is so big she could have a mole that size removed from it.
It's an off-colored remark. It was highly inappropriate. You want? I'll demand he's taxed. But clip him?
Is it all just about money?
I'll crack him good. I'll ask for $200,000.
$200,000 for insulting my wife. What's next, Carmine? You get the for $1 million?
Who wants the good?
I'm making a point. I'm talking about my wife's honor here. My honor.
We depend on this guy. There are millions of dollars at stake. We can't afford it, John.
A room full of guys making fun of my wife. And you're not going to let me deal with this?
I get a call from the lieutenant. Come to the office. I go to the lieutenant, another guy. Fortunately, he liked me. Now, I'm not saying everybody liked me. There was some COs in there that, because I was a mob guy and had a reputation, they didn't like me at all. So he says to me, Mike, he says, what's going on with your visits? I said, Lieutenant, what do you mean? He says, I want to tell you this. You know how the inmates used to snitch you out in there? They'd put a note under the lieutenant's door. That's how they'd snitch you out. He said, I'm getting more notes on you, that you're getting more visits than everybody else. Do you know that some of these inmates were actually counting my visit points and then reporting me? That's what you got to deal with in there. So got to be very careful, got to keep to yourself, got to watch who's around you. I already told in another video 3 words that help you through prison. Please, thank you, excuse me. Told you everybody in there wants respect they didn't have out on the street.
And that was a little Mafia action. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Patriotic Shorts.
I asked him, I said, please, I need medical attention. And he said, no medical attention until you cooperate with us and answer our questions. So this went on for a few minutes, and then he closed his book, got up, and walked out, and the guard came over, kicked me off the stool back onto the floor. And this routine went on then for the next 3.5 days. But they would come in several times, and I'd go on the stool and ask me questions, and I can't tell you, and okay, and then back on the floor and go through. And so it wasn't always the same. It wasn't always just that one officer. They had a couple of interrogators, and I always laugh. I said they had a watch bill, and I was on watch all the time.
It was cold, bitter cold. And so I went up over the hill, saw what was happening, obviously, and started pitching grenades at them over my head toward the tent. And fortunately was able to kill them all, or wound them all. Of course, they couldn't survive in that cold weather, wounded or not. So things got quiet after a while. There was moaning, going, and dying. And I was able to scramble up the hill with the rest of the guys. And fighting continued all night long, flares going up and everything else. So what we saw the next morning, it was just bodies all over. And are frozen stiff the way they fell. They very grotesque. Stiff, of course, and it was an awful sight. It really was.
What message do you bring?
Earth and water.
You rode all the way from Persia for earth and water.
Do not be coy or stupid, Persian. You can afford neither in Sparta.
What makes this woman think she can speak among men?
Because only Spartan women give birth to real men.
Let us walk.
If you value your lives over your complete annihilation, listen carefully, Leonidas. Xerxes conquers and controls everything he rests his eyes upon. He leads an army so massive, it shakes the ground with its march. All the god King Xerxes requires is this, a simple offering of earth and water, a token of Sparta's submission to the will of Xerxes.
Submission.
You're a madman.
Earth and water. But you'll find plenty of both down there.
No man, Persian or Greek, no man threatens a messenger.
You bring the crowns and heads of conquered kings to my city steps. You threaten my people with slavery and death.
This is madness.
This is Sparta!
So Trudeau, what did he do when he found out about this? Did he immediately inform Canadians of the breach? Did he fire anybody? No, no one was fired. Did he call inquiry to get to the bottom of it? No, he didn't do that either. Instead, he covered it all up. He defied 4 parliamentary orders to release these documents. When the Speaker tried to get them, he sued the Speaker to cover this up. He said it was all for national security, but well, we know from a committee composed of 4 members of Parliament, including 1 Liberal, and 3 judges, and I quote, the information appears to be mostly about protecting the organization from embarrassment for failures in policy and implementation, not legitimate national security concerns, and its release is essential to hold the government to account. In other words, there was no national security reason why we couldn't have had this before.
And that was the Patriotic Shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little motivation.
Many dreams die while suffering. I'm talking about emotionally, spiritually. It could be a relationship. When you're suffering, you give up on the very things that you wanted the most.
Life is going to beat you upside your head. Before you blow up, life will strip you to the core.
What makes you get up when you fall down? What makes your mentality change if there's a great situation or there's a bad situation? How do you dictate that based off the level of pain?
I need you to evaluate yourself and ask yourself the question, how are you wired? When you have a trial or a tribulation, how are you wired? Does it break you? Your problem is your pain has identified you. Your pain has destroyed you.
All of us will hit the wall. That wall shocked some people. That wall knocked the life out of some people. It didn't work out for them. They hit the wall and they turned around. But there's some small number. They decide, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be over there. This kind of person refuses to be denied.
I'm wired differently. I get excited about no. I love no. I love it. It turns me on. No, Eric, I'll be back. I'll be stronger when I come back.
This person doesn't care about the pain because this person knows something. There's no gain without pain. So this person comes back anyhow, again and again. And if you keep on hitting that wall, here's what happens to you. You will have an incredible breakthrough. And it's as if the universe says, let's help him out. I admire that kind of tenacity. Let's give her a hand. Let's send her assistance, send her resources. It will come out of nowhere. As you're working times with tears falling down your face. And you'll look back on the times and you will cherish those times.
When your mind knows it's not going to quit, your body will adapt to whatever is in front of it. What happens is you have all these voices that are telling you you're f***ed up and this is going to be hard. But for some reason, you put so much practice into you that you can ignore every one of them that are telling you you're not going to f***ing make it. And still be able to f***ing make it. Because you have put the practice in that you know this is the process. It's such a daunting task that all the voices are saying no. But you still have the conviction that I know I can do this.
When you get knocked down, and you're going to get knocked down, when you run into some roadblocks and you're going to run into them, you can always be able to bring yourself back in knowing if someone has done it, it's possible that I can do it. Some of you have been knocked out by life, and you got up and saw the blood. He hit me. Sometimes in life, you have to hit back. You got knocked on the ground. You had absolutely nothing to do with that. And I'm not blaming you for that. But if I come back a week later, you still on the ground. If I come back a year later, you still on the ground, that's your fault. If you get knocked down, there's nothing you can do about it. But getting back up has every single thing to do with you. And you will promise me that from this day forward, you will not be defeated. I just love myself enough not to be trapped in the same doggone spot for the rest of my life. I love myself too much. So what makes E.T. different than everybody else? Every year I just kept going. And I kept going. And I kept going. And I kept saying one day gonna be my day. But you know what I'm not gonna do? I'm not gonna quit in the process. I'm not gonna give up. I'm not gonna give in. And the problem with you, you've not recycled your pain. You're still living off talent. And I challenge you. Average people live off talent. Phenomenal people live off effort. Recycle your pain. Get something from it. You're already in pain. Use it. Do something with it. Allow it to take you to the next level. Allow your pain to push you to greatness. Success isn't a straight line. It's a maze. And when you think you figure that maze out, you hit a wall. And you got to turn around and start again.
Everybody's got a f***ing plan so they can get in the f***ing mouth. So when your plan fails, when you get knocked down on the f***ing canvas, when everything falls apart in your life and your plan is f***ed up, what the f*** are you going to do? There's only one motherfucking option. Stay f***ing hard.
And I'm not here because I'm the best. I'm here because they tried to break me and they couldn't. Oh, I'm wired differently. I didn't start crying. I didn't say, why me? I'm doing good to the world. I'm not hurting anybody. Why me? I'm wired differently. I can. I will. I must. We turn tragedy into
to triumphs. That's what lions do. It does not make a difference what the circumstance is. Lions don't cry. Lions don't give up. Lions don't quit. Lions hunt. That's what we do for a living. So do me a favor. From this point forward, execution is worship. I don't make the big bucks because I talk. I make the big bucks because I execute.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Daily Dad for May the 24th.
May 24th. Remember this about most people.
No intelligent man believes that anybody ever willingly errs or willingly does base or evil deeds. Socrates.
There are a lot of selfish people out there, cruel people, stupid people, even evil people. And sometimes they're all one person. And your kids are going to meet some of those people. Are they ready? Perhaps a better question is, are you ready? To protect them from the worst of that sort, of course. Also to make sure that your cynicism about the world, about people, does not affect your children too early. There's a great children's book called Most People that reminds us, most people are good. Most people are trying as hard as they can. Most people will help you if they can. Most people want the same things, the book says. Most people are happy. And even the people who aren't, the author reminds us, well, they'd rather be happy if they could. With our life experience, we might struggle to believe that that's true. Regardless, we can't pass on the psychic burden of our own experiences and frustrations, people from our past. And this is the difficult tension we have to resolve as parents. We have to prepare our children for a world that is not all sunshine and kittens. We also have to get them to understand that the darkness of the world is not complete. In fact, it's distinctly the minority. We want our kids to carry the fire, to keep the brightness alive. We want them to seek it out in other people. We want them to be like most people, good, kind, happy, helpful. And it's we who will chart that path.
And that was The Daily Dad by Ryan Holiday for May the 24th. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Bishop Robert Barron.
Do you know how our culture puts such a premium now on safety, doesn't it? Safe spaces and keeping us safe, and I'm being threatened, and that's threatening my safety. Well, look, I mean, I get it. We all want to be safe. It's a value. But can I suggest to you that a religion that puts before our eyes a man pinned to a cross is not a religion putting a high priority on safety? The saints don't strike me as people that were really big on safety. Rather, find your mission. Let Christ come to life in you. Set your heart on fire. Become, in some way, and look, it's different for every one of us, because the Lord gave us distinctive gifts and a distinctive experience and background. We're meant to carry his love into the world in some distinctive way. And then you'll know who you are. Do your mission. You'll find joy, and you'll transfigure the world.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, pragmatism is the philosophy which holds that there is no objective reality or permanent truth, that there are no absolute principles, no valid abstractions, no firm concepts, that anything may be tried by rule of thumb, that objectivity consists of collective subjectivism, that whatever people wish to be true is true, whatever people wish to exist does exist, provided a consensus says so. If you want to avert the final disaster, it is this type of thinking that you must face, grasp, and reject. Unquote. And that was the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the 33 strategies of war.
From the I Ching. 6 in the third place means he finds a comrade. Now he beats the drum. Now he stops. Now he sobs. Now he sings. Here the source of a man's strength lies not in himself, but in his relation to other people. No matter how close to them he may be, if his center of gravity depends on them, he is inevitably tossed to and fro between joy and sorrow, rejoicing to high heaven, then sad unto death. This is the fate of those who depend upon an inner accord with other persons whom they love.
And that was the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. So if you're a Democrat, you need to vote Republican because the Democrats don't care about their constituents, but the Republicans do. The evidence of that is in the House of Representatives, where the Democrats all act in unison, unified. You never hear them talking about or against other members of their caucus. Everybody's unified. They're all marching in lockstep. Whereas the Republicans have a tendency to bicker and whatnot. That's because the Republicans know that it's the House of Representatives, and the Democrats think it's the House of Democrats and Republicans, and they think they're there to represent their party and not necessarily their constituents. So again, if you want to be represented, you need to quit the Democrat Party and vote Republican. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, how to block brainwashing. Stage 2, losing the children, brainwashing in American schools. Once you have damaged the conscious mind, children have no ability to resist mind attack. You want to change the values, beliefs, and behaviors of American children. How do you do it? Attitudinal change in the United States was so all-pervasive that to many people it still remains an unknown phenomenon. One of the reasons is that to effect successful change of so monumental a nature, you must keep a low profile. You do not want to startle a sheep. Brainwashing has also been relabeled. Try these on for size. Values clarification. Decision-making, effective education, quest, drug prevention, sex education, gifted and talented programs. You use these masks, these verbal Trojan horses, to get your foot in the proverbial door. What's in a name? I'll tell you, Shakespeare, everything. For some reason, most people think a brainwasher will call his indoctrination procedure Dr. Evil's despicable brainwashing extravaganza. No, folks. Evil people always pretend to be good until it's too late. Like the vampire in myth, you agreed to let him in. These word games are known as flags of convenience. This brainwashing is also known as social engineering or experimentation. You must look at concrete, real-world specifics. The programs listed above focus very briefly and in a shallow manner on the overt topics they claim to address. The reshaping of values in psychology are the main focus and target. Most of the time is spent on mind modification. Sex education programs were only vaguely scientific or medical in approach. It's all about attitude change, not only toward sex, no, toward family, parents, society, and life. The percentage of time devoted to brainwashing is 3/4 of the allotted time. I have tried to visually represent it below. Topic: brainwashing. Stage 1 in the process is usually labeled self-awareness training. Stage 2, a series of exercises that help you gain understanding and appreciation of your values as autonomous individuals. The aim of such training is to radically alter the child's governing philosophy of life. This worldview always radically differs from those of the parents and wider society in general. At least it did till recently. Now the cult mindset is dominant. These programs bypass the intellect and seek to condition emotional responses. Technically, this is known as affective education. It's simply brainwashing. A quick recap from Manual 1. 1. Emotional stress, shock, or desensitization to break down intellectual and emotional resistance. 2. Isolation, physical, emotional, the familiar, usual supports, etc. 3. Cross-examining pre-existing values via manipulative peer pressure, bullying. Stripping the individual's normal defenses, reserve, dignity, privacy, ability to decline to participate. Rewarding change. This may simply be a release of tensions. It can be symbolic and or more tangible. On September 21st, 1990, ABC TV aired a show about death education in schools. This entailed children being taken to a morgue and being encouraged to touch dead bodies. The aim was to desensitize the children. This produces a state known as emotional disruption. Younger children are more vulnerable to classic brainwashing techniques. Children on such courses are encouraged to write their future epitaphs on their gravestones. They are encouraged to write suicide notes. They are encouraged to talk about death, especially if it involved a loved one. Trauma revivification. They are asked to make their own coffins from a shoebox. Aim, to focus the child's mind on death, to focus the child's mind on committing suicide. And that was from the book, How to Block Brainwashing by the Rogue Hypnotist. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Barney and Company.
Thanks, Phil. Top forecasters predicting a very strong hurricane season. I guess that's why the insurance companies are taking a hit, right?
Well, they were down yesterday after this news. Now they're coming up a little bit. Can I just say I'm a little nervous about the Atlantic hurricane season? We are expecting 7 to 25 storms, record high. 8 to 13 hurricanes, record high. 4 to 7 major hurricanes, Cat 3 or higher. Hurricane season begins June 1st.
But you live in New York. You're not
I know, but I always like to take a summer vacation, and this makes me nervous about where I can go this summer.
All right, we hear you. Thanks a lot.
So the response to this, if you get this at work, let's say there are a lot of hurricanes, then when you go to work and you hear about it from the communists at work, you ask them, well, why'd you allow this to happen? If they come to you today and say, hey, there's a prediction that there's going to be a lot of hurricanes happening, then again, the question is, why is the Biden administration allowing this to happen? And it'll freeze them right up. Two things on this. Number one, authority and responsibility are commensurate, and shoot the messenger, or blame the messenger in this particular case. I like blame the messenger better. Don't allow these folks to be transparent. They want to pretend that they're just hey, I'm just a messenger. Don't go after me. Don't look at me. I'm just the messenger. Always go after the messenger, because the messenger bears responsibility as well. So again, if they're going to make a big deal out of hurricanes, why are you allowing it to happen? Why is the Biden administration allowing this to happen? If they try to say, well, it's because Republicans are blocking it, why are you allowing that to happen? They have to accept responsibility if they're going to assume authority. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now more Stuart Varney.
Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, warns that gas prices will go up if Trump is reelected. Can you explain that to me?
I can't. It's pretty wacky logic. So
Try.
Here you go. In her own words.
We just saw that the former president met with oil executives last week saying, hey, you give me $1 billion and I'll make sure that you get the policies that are favorable to raising gas prices and making sure that that a lot of these companies continue to price gouge without proper oversight or regulation. And
so again, the answers to this one is always going to be, this kind of thing is why are you allowing it to happen? Why would you allow anybody to conspire, any individual or groups to conspire to raise gas prices? Why would you allow that to happen? If it's happening now, if they're price gouging now, why are you allowing that to happen? Again, authority and responsibility are commensurate. If you're going to assume the authority for making sure that people don't get gouged, then you have to accept responsibility when that doesn't work, and you have to explain. So again, that's the way to deal with it, especially because, again, these are talking points that you're going to come up with at work. Donald Trump is going to raise gas prices, and always the best answer is, why are you going to allow him to do that? Back in a minute. And as a further addendum to this is, it's easy. All of this is easy. Defeating these people is very, very easy. They're always bluffing. Once you understand that they're bluffing, then it's just to figure out what, where, why, when, and how, and then come up with the proper solution. And in this particular type of a case, it's always good to, again, get them on the responsibility end of things. Back in a minute. Thank you. So Stuart Varney's My Take today, he was talking about the difference, of course, between Donald Trump and President Biden. And Donald Trump went to the Bronx and he delivered a positive message, whereas President Biden went to Morehouse College and delivered a negative message, a message of doom and gloom. So the thing he's missing here is that Donald Trump is doing what all politicians should be doing, and that is he is going out and looking for sinners, so to speak. Instead of preaching to the converted, preaching to the choir, he goes out and looks to convert people. He goes into the heart of various Democrat strongholds and looks to convert Democrats to not only be Republicans, but to be Trump supporters. And that's exactly the way it should be. Every politician should be vying for every vote. Right now, the way the situation stands is we have two political parties. Each political party is trying to get one-party rule. That's what they're trying to do. One-party rule is a dictatorship. Okay, and each party hates the other. Each party claims the other one will destroy America. We got to get rid of all that. You and I can do that by recruiting. And that's exactly what Donald Trump does with his rally is a recruitment rally. Joe Biden's rally is a shore up the base rally. So we need to recruit. If you're a Republican, you need to recruit Democrats. If you're a Democrat, you need to recruit Republicans. Convince Republicans that the Democrat Party is better at, say, as AOC is making the point, keeping gas prices under control. Republicans can say to the Democrats, we're about empowering women because we're all about making sure that a woman gets child support. And we will strengthen the laws so that women get child support and they don't have to chase a man all over the country to get it, that they will get their child support. And so that kind of thing, where we're recruiting each other. And then what happens is the political parties then have no choice. They have to go out and vie for every single vote they can get. And then when that happens, it's back to the voters, the people running this country, rather than the political parties. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Policecraft.
20. Evidence. Academy recruits are brought in to help homicide detective Rich Garvey search a large outdoor area for homicide evidence. One enterprising recruit produces, from the rear yard of 704 Newington, a clear plastic bag half filled with a dull yellow liquid. "Sir," he asks, holding the bag up to eye level, "is this important?" "That appears to be a bag of piss," says Garvey. "You can put it down any time you like." David Simon, Homicide, a year on the killing streets. The hard sciences have never been my strong suit. If memory serves, I scraped out a D on my senior physics final. So when I became a cop, I made a point to pepper the CSI techs with questions to make sure I was on the right track in terms of gathering evidence at crime scenes. And when I heard a lieutenant from Bayview Station say, "If I ever commit a crime and Ronan Shouldice is assigned to the case, I may as well just turn myself in because he'll find the evidence that will put me away," I thought, Ronan Shouldice, I gotta have lunch with this guy. I had heard of Inspector Shouldice before, a native of Dublin with nearly 30 years on the job and over 20 in CSI, who used to carry a toolkit with him to help burglary victims shore up their broken doors and windows until the repairman could come in the morning, and who once sealed the fate of a murder suspect by finding his partial prints on the underside of a toilet lid at a brutal slaying scene. Shouldice was kind enough to meet me for that lunch and helped confirm and fine-tune the facts that follow here about prints and DNA. Baseball bats are notoriously hard to get prints off unless they have a fresh, lacquered finish, not only because wood isn't the best surface for prints, but because the wielder of the bat tends to grip the instrument so hard that any prints left become pressure-distorted and opaque. Handguns aren't much better. Shouldice told me his team gets usable prints off about 5 to 8% of firearms. This percentage is low because guns have checkered hand grips and serrated edges where the shooter handles them, and when you're looking for prints, smooth is good and textured isn't. The best chance for gun prints is off the magazine, which has no rough edges. But all those grooves and crevices are a good bet for DNA because they scrape the skin cells off the shooter's hand. Even if the shooter wore gloves during the crime, that doesn't mean he was wearing them the day before when he was doing his Tom Mix quick-draw moves in the mirror. So when processing a gun, the seasoned ID tech will print the smooth parts and swab the serrated parts for DNA. DNA can be found in blood, saliva, mucus, semen, hair roots, and sometimes in vomit and urine. Conventional wisdom used to be there was no DNA in feces unless blood was found in it, so if you sent bloodless poop to the lab, all they'd be able to tell you is that maybe the guy had pizza for lunch. Then they'd tell you, "Please stop sending us poop." But on July 28, 2017, the Ventura County Sheriff's Office in California arrested a suspect named Andrew Jensen for burglary based on DNA evidence yielded from the dump Jensen had taken in the burglary victim's toilet and neglected to flush. I called the detective on the case, and he confirmed the DNA came from a swab of blood-free poop. I checked with our crime lab and was told that if you had a solid poop coil, CSI can swab the outside of it to collect epithelial cells that get sloughed off during the process of elimination. I bet CSI techs everywhere are rejoicing at this news because, folks, work just became a lot more fun. With every serious crime scene, you have to consider contact DNA, which can be found on a suspect's clothing or on things that he touches. It's more difficult to get than DNA from bodily fluids, but still viable. Basically, if the suspect wore it, held it, or drank from it, it might have his DNA on it. If a criminal abandons his jacket at the scene, an astute investigator will submit it to the lab to swab the inner collar and hood, the insides of the sleeves, and the zipper for DNA. The inside of ski masks is pretty good for contact DNA, as is the inside of hat bands. Fake fingernails broken off and left at a crime scene might result in a DNA profile. DNA from the hands of suspects has been found on the necks of strangling victims. Our SF lab has recovered DNA from a crowbar and from the nose guard of sunglasses that have helped me solve cold burglaries. But just because a suspect's DNA is on an item doesn't mean he was the last one to hold that item. Maybe he sneezed on it, or shook hands with someone who then handled it. And there's no way to tell when DNA was left. It could be from 6 months ago or from today. If a DNA profile is generated from evidence, it's entered into CODIS, Combined DNA Index System, the FBI's computer warehouse. Then you sit back and wait. Bring your copy of The Silmarillion, because it's gonna be a while. I had a burglary that happened in November, and I got DNA results from the scene the following July, which was actually pretty quick for San Francisco. Even for homicides, which are fast-tracked, the quickest turnaround for DNA results is probably going to be 1 to 3 weeks. If the computer makes a match, you'll receive some gobbledygook paperwork from the state that says the chances of your profile not being from your suspect are something like 1 in 40 nonillion. In my jurisdiction, you still have to get a confirmatory sample from the suspect to seal the deal. This is a royal pain in the ass, especially if your suspect is a transient who likes to play hide-and-seek with the cops. Last you heard, he had no fixed address, but could possibly be found underneath the 101 overpass, through the hole in the chain-link fence, and in the 7th tent on the left as you count forward from the shopping cart filled with bicycle parts. Need DNA from your suspect, but lack the probable cause for a warrant? If you're in a public place shadowing your target, you can retrieve his discarded cigarette butt or soft drink straw and submit it for DNA testing, and the results will be admissible in court. Advances in DNA come at a rapid clip, and labs are increasingly able to do a lot more with a lot less, such that some of the information I have relayed here could be out of date in the next few years. It used to be that a single DNA test from crime labs in some jurisdictions would run upward of $2,000, especially if the sample had to be outsourced. When I last checked with our lab, now it's more like $200, which means we can afford to fight crime again. One of the more delightful moments in evidence collection is when a crook, under the mistaken belief that getting rid of the security camera means getting rid of the video footage, climbs up to disable the camera, thus affording the surveillance system a close-up look at his face. My colleague Sergeant Nick Pena once said of such a fellow, "He does everything short of fogging the lens and wiping it clean." The delicious irony, of course, is that this man, in trying to avoid detection, is putting himself on full display. But some thieves just don't get it. Some, in fact, stare down that camera so intently, it's as if they think there's money inside it. Not all views of the suspect are so crystalline. I've watched many a surveillance tape where the main action takes place just around the periphery of the camera view. All you see is a flurry of knees and feet. Could be some guys fighting, or they could be doing the lambada. And you know who has surprisingly lousy surveillance cameras? Banks. You see still photos from bank robbery crime alerts all the time that are consistently grainy. I asked one robbery investigator why this is, and he used that banks have no incentive to invest in a high-end system. All their money is FDIC insured. If a robber steals their cash, the federal government replaces it. I'm waiting on someone in Washington to institute quality standards for bank video surveillance to help catch more of these folks who are ripping us all off. I don't know. The Fed should consult me on more things. I have good ideas. They don't quite have the technology to get workable prints off spent shell casings, and Ronan Scholdice was unimpressed with the machine that purportedly does. Most people know you can match both a bullet and a shell casing to the weapon of origin by the distinct markings left on the round as it travels through the gun barrel. But you can also, at times, match the cartridges to the magazine they came from. This doesn't normally work with the first several rounds you load because they go in easy, but as anyone who has ever thumbed bullets into a spring-loaded magazine will tell you, the last few cartridges carry a lot of tension. That tension leaves unique patterns on the cartridge. This is helpful when you find some shell casings at a crime scene and then find a nearby thug with an empty magazine in his pocket. You can use the sweet science of ballistics to pulverize his dreams of getting away scot-free. Another ballistic staple is the collection of gunshot residue, GSR, which is made up of tiny particles formed from the burn of a fired bullet. It's a tool law enforcement uses to see if a suspect recently pulled the trigger. You want to get it within 4 hours if possible, and if you can't obtain it at the scene, you bag the suspect's hands until you can swab them later. You want to ask the suspect if he's right or left-handed, and if there would be any reason why he'd have GSR on him. GSR has considerable limitations. A suspect in the know might claim he works in an auto shop and got the equivalent of GSR from a car's brake pads. Or he might protest that he was near the gun being fired, but didn't fire it himself. Or his lawyer will surmise that his client picked up transfer GSR from one of the cops who arrested him, probably the officer who qualified at the range earlier that day. A specially trained forensic analyst at a lab with the right equipment might be able to break down the test results by number of particles. This fellow had 10 particles of GSR on him, and this woman had 200. But odds are your department doesn't have the funds to send hundreds of shooting cases a year to this specialist. So you opt for standardized testing, which simply tells you if GSR is present, not how much of it there is. Given these shortcomings, some jurisdictions don't even bother with GSR, but it can serve as a good interrogation tool with a rookie criminal. You can try to convince him GSR is better than DNA and tells you all you need to know about him and the gun he fired and the ammunition he used. After all, GSR and DNA are both 3-letter acronyms that sound kind of science-y. Bullet trajectory analysis is another vital area of ballistic science. A trained CSI officer will use long lines of colored string to show the jury the path of the bullet to debunk a defense attorney's claim that his client was on his knees in the process of surrendering when the police shot him. On a homicide case, trajectory analysis can mathematically prove, for instance, that the driver fired the fatal shot, not the passenger, unless the passenger happened to be 30 feet tall. Police work is a job where you delve deeply into other people's cell phones and call records looking for evidence to shore up your case. Their phone configurations are often different from yours. Take contacts, for instance. On your own cell, you might have an old pal saved on your scroll-down list with his college handle of Squid. But the majority of your list tends to be birth names, either first or last. Antonio, Natasha, McMilton. Not so with many of the street criminals' phones you encounter. Contacts are listed by their nicknames, like Cupcake, Lil Blue, and D-Boy. Some are just classified by their customary garb, like white tea. Others by produce, like melon. There's Dirtball and the enigmatic Doug Freeze. One poor soul is just called Ugly. One of my favorite contacts of all time is Skis Nuts. I almost called him just to get the backstory. Colorful nicknames aside, looking through someone's phone records is excruciating. The resulting report from your search warrant can total thousands of pages of texts, emails, calls, videos, and photos. This glob of information traditionally includes commercial and homemade porn, selfies of the suspect smoking weed, multiple photos of orange soda, and orders of fried fish in styrofoam cartons. Money is a recurring theme. You'll see the suspect holding a wad of cash, biting down on the bills like it's a stack of flapjacks, and spreading money out on his bed. Group photos follow a common theme. A dozen or so scowling males on some project stairwell, holding their arms out, simulating handguns or rifles that they point at the cameras. A few will be wearing ski masks, despite sunny conditions. As far as what they're looking for in a woman, jean skirts and leopard tattoos on upper breasts seem to be in fashion. And then there's this text I came across from the girlfriend of a gang member. Listen, any bitch can spend time with you, blow a dime with you, cuff online with you, fuck and 69 with you. But me, I'm a ride with you, hold a 9 for you. If you need it, I got it. I'm a grind with you. If the cops come and snatch you up, I'm doing time with you and putting my right hand on the book, and I'm straight lying for you. The loyalty is admirable. You gotta give her that. Photos are among the most basic and powerful evidence available to an investigator. A good FTO will instruct his recruit to take them in logical progression and describe them in the police report so that a year from now, when the cop is on the stand, he can remember what he took a picture of and why. I especially like taking pictures of drunk people. Say some plastered Chad takes a swing at you and you arrest him. Months from now, he's going to be in court, all polite, and with a snazzy haircut saying, "No, Your Honor, I did no such thing." But your photos at the scene show him with bloodshot eyes and crusted vomit on his shirt, and he's grabbing his own crotch in defiance. You have crystallized this special moment for all of time. I wrote about jail calls briefly in 400 Things Cops Know, and have touched on them earlier, but I'm returning to the topic because I find it fascinating, chiefly how a suspect will incriminate himself despite the clear, audible warning that jail calls are recorded and subject to monitoring. The way it usually goes down is like this. A suspect will call a friend or family member from lockup, and that person will ask what happened. And having just heard the warning, the suspect will respond with something like, "I can't get into it too much on this phone." Or he'll say the obligatory, "I didn't do shit." But then he keeps talking, and he forgets about the warning, sometimes just a few minutes later. He might describe precisely where he discarded the handgun he used in his crime, using only flimsy code, calling the gun the bitch, for instance, to try to cover his tracks. When a concerned relative asks why he's in jail again for robbery, he'll admit he got greedy. One of my colleagues told me of a jail call he listened to where his shooting suspect expressed indignation about the purported facts of the case, saying, "Hell yeah, he shot the guy, but he for damn sure didn't rob him." In short, the suspect inadvertently tells on himself. Perhaps he can't help it. There is far too much in his life that is lawless. It's bound to surface. Beyond their evidentiary value, jail calls give you a window into the suspect's world, and that world is frequently bleak. Suspects alternate between bluster, "I've been locked up my whole fucking life, this ain't nothing," and outright despair, "Can't do no more time, I'm going crazy up in here." You get a sense of the tremendous pressure they're under. The phone call itself is stressful. The first few are free, but then it's $10 for 15 minutes, like long distance used to cost in the 80s. And the girlfriend is irate because she's got a baby on the way, and now her man is in county again, and just who's gonna pay rent? You'll hear relationships rise and fall in the span of a few phone conversations as two people try to pick up the shards of their lives while a robotic voice interrupts them to report, "You have 1 minute remaining." And then the suspect will hang up and invariably call his second and sometimes third girlfriend and profess his love and devotion to them too. Although, judging from the fallout of the Ashley Madison scandal, this unfaithfulness is perhaps no more than the national average. Students of linguistics will note how jail call conversations are peppered with urban vernacular. The possessive mine is pronounced mines. For sure is pronounced faux show. The N-word is tossed around liberally, regardless of race. The white or Hispanic suspect calls his white or Hispanic friend nigger. Cops are referred to as niggers. "These niggas hit me with some bullshit, blood." Attorneys are niggers. Probation officers. Judges. One of the problems in making a jail call is that the sheriff's deputies have the suspect's cell phone stored in property, so he has to dial from memory. If he does recall a number and gets through to someone, he has to ask that person for other people's numbers, which he then has to remember too, because they don't let you have a pen and paper in your cell. One enterprising prostitute, whose jail calls I listened to, took her sandwich apart and used her fingernail to scratch a needed phone number in a piece of processed cheese. Talk of bail dominates jail calls. How much it is, who can raise it, and what bail bondsman will be willing to work with them. These discussions frequently lead to gangster math, as found in this exchange from one of my assault cases. Suspect: my bail be $250,000. Friend: how much is that? Suspect: $125,000. Friend: damn. But despite the grim picture jail calls paint, there are people in the suspect's life who are trying to stand by him and steer him right. An uncle will implore the suspect to speak properly to the judge. A cousin will tell him he can crash on his couch if he gets evicted. There's a fair amount of Bible talk. God's got his hand on you. The Lord has not left you. Let's pray together. But even if the suspect has some family support and a shot at beating the case, his prospects for the future are often dubious at best. I was struck by this when I listened to the jail calls of a 23-year-old gangbanger who had never worked a day in his life. His girlfriend demanded to know what kind of job he was going to get upon release. The suspect paused for an uncomfortably long time. It became clear he couldn't think of one job he would like or could do or know how to get. He ended up saying, I don't know. Something that's good. I just want to make hella dough. I tried to think of a lucrative and appropriate work field for him, a man with no education, skills, or interests, and a violent felony record. Roller derby? When you listen to jail calls, you're on high alert for threats to any witness. Nobody but nobody messes with your witnesses. But once in a while, the threatened witness is you. The threats won't be formal or clearly spoken. No one is going to say, I have sinister intent toward Officer Marvin Johnson and his partner, and I seek to quell them. It will be a general comment that someone needs to take care of a problem. And who might this problem be? Well, if Officer Johnson is a plainclothes cop who always wears a baseball cap, he will be described as Ball Cap. Johnson's partner? He doesn't even merit a nickname. He's the nigga that be with Ball Cap. I myself have not yet been threatened on jail calls, but my name's come up. My moniker has been that Marine-looking motherfucker, which, having known some Marines, I take as high praise. These threats don't always materialize. Even the most stone-cold thug knows the risk-reward formula in going after a cop is skewed against them. If you are the named party on one of these calls, best-case scenario is you get an uneventful 2 weeks off with a cop stationed at your door, and you catch up on every episode of Stranger Things. You don't deal with hairs or fibers much as an investigator unless you're working a serious violent felony. Your department doesn't have the time, resources, or manpower to trot out the evidence vacuum for every auto burglary. But you know that a single strand of hair can give you the sex, age, and race of a suspect. It can tell you if that hair was ever bleached or permed, and if it was cut, fell out, or was yanked out. If there's no hair at a crime scene, it means the suspect was probably bald or was wearing a skull cap, because people leave their hair around all the time. We're like shedding cats. Another somewhat uncommon but still viable evidentiary tool is to use a mold of a suspect's teeth to compare to the bite marks left on a victim. During trial, both the prosecution and the defense might call in forensic odontologists who will debate over the strength of the ID in court, which is why you're hoping the bad guy has something distinctive in his mouth, like a broken molar. As a cop, you sometimes just plain blow it when handling evidence. Part of this is the tendency of line cops to act like mini detectives at major crime scenes, to think they're going to come up with the big breakthrough, So they open drawers they have no business opening, pick up evidence and examine it before it's been photographed or processed, move things around for no objectively good reason. This is called finger-fucking a scene, and everyone has been guilty of it, even seasoned investigators. And most cops have heard a story about a colleague who has returned to a crime scene to retrieve something he forgot, like his flashlight or a bottle of soda, only to see an ID tech already bagging it as evidence. The resulting conversation is super awkward. It's sobering how much evidence gets overlooked on the first pass, like the narcotics squad that executes a search warrant on a house and somehow misses the stack of dope packaged for sale in plain view on the kitchen table. I have found items of evidence that other officers have missed, and have missed items myself that other officers have found. As a newer cop in Milwaukee, I was sure I had thoroughly combed a shooting scene up until the point when the detective on point went outside and found an additional shell casing on the walkway leading to the garage. "And that's why we double-check," he said, casting a dubious eye at me.
And that was Chapter 20, Evidence from Policecraft. It's by Adam Plantinga and read by Steve Marvel. Back in a minute. Thank you. The following is one of my voiceover demos. If you're a voiceover artist and you would like to advertise one of your demos on my podcast, please send an MP3 to thedrill12, all one word, at gmail.com. That's thedrill12 at gmail.com. Back in a minute.
Americans love scenery. We want to see it all, from one coast to the next, Mount Rushmore down to the Everglades. So hop into a Chevy Malibu and take the scenic route. It's the car you knew America could build. There's a place where people count on friendships they can trace back generations, where they can count on the same stool at the coffee shop waiting for them every morning. This place is called Glen Ellen, and you can find it in every bottle of Glen Ellen wine. This is craft brewed Herman Joseph's, the smoothest, easiest drinking specialty beer in the entire solar system. And I believe you'll find drinkable in the dictionary right after don't order a beer you can't drink. Zoingo! Boingo! The freestyle pogo with more boing, more bounce. Bounce further, bounce higher with Zoingo Boingo. To see what makes Arrowhead Mountain Spring water different from those other waters, you have to go back to the source. And with Arrowhead, that means going back a little farther and longer than most. Between security challenged and security strengthened, there's one important word: how. And it is the how that makes all the difference to our nation and our world. Lockheed Martin. We never forget who we're working for. What makes Kraft Singles so good? 2 out of every 3 kids don't get the recommended amount of calcium. But with Kraft Singles, they get a good source of calcium and the taste they love. Kraft Singles. Magic every single time. Throw boring overboard with a new real meal from Long John Silver's. A meal worthy of a plate. Just $4.99. Only at Long John Silver's. We may not all be geniuses, but we can all do something smart. Introducing the Hyundai 199 Sonata Lease. It's a smart deal on a really smart car.
Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.